I had just taken my first sip of coffee when my phone buzzed with that kind of urgency that makes your stomach twist. It was my manager. Something about a client emergency and needing someone on a plane within hours. And of course, I said yes. That's what I do. I fix things. I show up. I carry the weight so no one else has to. I tossed a few work outfits into my bag, heart racing but steady, already planning my approach before even leaving the house. Mark was sprawled across the couch when I told him. He barely sat up, just blinked a few times and mumbled something about me being amazing. "Go save the world," he said, forcing a lazy grin. I leaned in, kissed his cheek. His skin was warm, but something about the way he looked at me felt distant. I almost asked if everything was okay, but I didn't. I figured he was tired. We'd been distant lately, sure, but I thought it was just life getting in the way. So I grabbed my bag and left. The airport was loud and buzzing, but weirdly, it brought me a bit of peace. I found a seat near the gate, opened my laptop, and tried to shift into work mode. That's when my phone lit up again. It was Mrs. Halverson, our elderly neighbor who always waved when I pulled into the driveway. "Hi, dear. Could you please ask your husband to turn the music down? The party is getting a bit out of hand." My stomach dropped. My first thought was, what party? And then, just like that, something in me clicked. I didn't think. I didn't wait. I booked a car back home. The car ride home felt endless. Every red light stretched like a cruel joke. Every slow driver ahead of us felt personal. My mind wouldn't shut off. I kept thinking maybe it was nothing, maybe a misunderstanding, a neighbor mixing up addresses, or a surprise he hadn't mentioned. But that sinking feeling in my gut? It wasn't new. It had been whispering to me for months. The way he'd been pulling away, the distracted looks, the way he laughed more with strangers on his phone than with me over dinner. I stared out the window, barely blinking, my heart thudding like it knew what I didn't want to admit. I'd spent years building something steady with him, something real, something safe. I held us together when work got hard, when the spark faded, when life turned us into distant roommates. I believed love was showing up even when things weren't easy. But now, that belief felt like a thread unraveling, and I couldn't stop pulling at it, even as I wished with everything in me that I was wrong. The driver asked if I was okay when I clenched the seatbelt so tightly my knuckles went white. I just nodded. What was I supposed to say? I think my husband threw a party the second I left for the airport. It sounded ridiculous. It felt surreal. I hadn't even been gone 2 hours. But my hands were shaking. Something was happening. Something I wasn't meant to see. And yet, something told me I needed to see it. I needed to catch it before it vanished behind lies and empty apologies. As we turned onto my street, I could already hear it, the bass thudding through the pavement, laughter spilling out into the night air like it belonged to someone else's life. There were cars everywhere, parked along the curb, half on lawns, headlights still warm. My heart was racing, but my face stayed still. I don't know how I kept my composure. Maybe part of me had already broken on the ride home. Or maybe I'd trained myself too well to stay calm when the ground beneath me was crumbling. The porch light was on. That same warm glow I used to associate with comfort. Now it just felt like a spotlight, waiting to expose whatever was on the other side of the door. I didn't even knock. I had keys. It was my house. At least I thought it was. The moment I stepped inside, it was like I'd walked into a different universe. Loud music, perfume in the air, people I'd never seen lounging on my furniture, laughing like they belonged there, like I didn't. I stood there, invisible in my own home. No one noticed me. Not at first. I could have screamed, but I didn't. I just watched. And with every second, the quiet inside me grew louder. I hadn't even made it past the hallway, but I already knew. Something had shifted. Permanently. And I wasn't sure yet what I was going to do. But I knew one thing with chilling certainty. I hadn't come home early just to disappear. I stepped further inside, and the sound hit me like a wave. Laughter, clinking glasses, loud music echoing off the walls I once painted myself. Every inch of the house felt foreign, like someone had stolen the skeleton of my life and dressed it up in chaos. There were women everywhere. Tight dresses, high heels, red lipstick smudged across cocktail glasses. Strangers, giggling in corners, snapping selfies against the backdrop of my living room, the same one where I once hung Christmas stockings. No one turned to look at me. I wasn't even a blip on their radar. One woman brushed past me on her way to the kitchen, not even offering a glance. I saw open bottles of wine on the counter, sticky liquor spills on the floor, and the vase Mark gave me for our 5th anniversary now filled with plastic straws. I stood in the center of it all, completely still. It was like walking into someone else's life, except it was mine. And he had opened the door wide, letting the world walk all over it. I moved slowly, trying to make sense of it. Not screaming, not crying, just watching, observing, collecting. My heels clicked against the tile like a metronome to the numbness setting in. And still, not a single person seemed to care that I was there. I passed by my own wedding photo, shoved face down on a side table, like even the house itself was trying to forget I ever existed in it. But I remembered. Every wall, every memory. And still, I kept walking. I followed the sound of louder music toward the backyard, and that's when I saw him. Mark, shirtless, grinning, holding a drink like he hadn't a care in the world. He was seated like a king, sprawled in one of the patio chairs, surrounded by 3 women who looked like they belonged on the cover of a cheap magazine. One had her hand on his shoulder. Another was feeding him something off a toothpick. The third? She was on his lap, her head tilted back in laughter, like they shared some secret joke. Time didn't stop. It didn't even slow. But everything inside me did. I didn't yell. I didn't gasp. I just stood there, watching the man I married laugh like a teenager on spring break, completely at home in the wreckage he created. And in that moment, I felt something shift. Not a crack, not a break, a clean snap, like a cord being cut. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was something colder, something quieter, something far more dangerous. Eventually, he saw me. Our eyes locked, and that smirk on his face drained into confusion, then panic. He froze, mid-sip. The woman in his lap turned to see what he was staring at. But I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I let him sit there, unraveling under the weight of my silence. I turned around, walked past the mess, past the strangers, past the music, and stepped out of the house like it never belonged to me at all. I didn't rush to the car. I didn't break down. I walked. Slow, deliberate, one foot in front of the other. My heels sank slightly into the grass as I moved past the line of cars cluttering the curb. I didn't even look back. Not once. Because I knew if I did, I might lose that strange, steady calm holding me together. And I needed that calm more than I needed answers. More than I needed apologies. I wasn't ready to scream. I was ready to think. Inside the car, I sat in silence for a long time. The engine was off, windows slightly cracked. I could still hear the thump of the music, feel the bass in my chest like it was mocking me. But in that stillness, I made a quiet promise to myself. He wouldn't get a second chance to explain this away. Not with a stuttered excuse, not with drunken nonsense, not with flowers and fake tears. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a choice. And now, I had one to make too. I didn't drive off right away. I just let the reality settle over me like a second skin. This wasn't a nightmare I could wake up from. It was real. And it had unfolded right in front of my eyes. And while he was still inside playing the part of some bachelor, I was already writing the next scene. One where I didn't fall apart. One where I didn't beg. One where I took back the pen and rewrote the ending myself. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw things or call my best friend in the middle of the night. Instead, I went quiet. That dangerous kind of quiet that comes when a woman has seen enough. The kind of quiet that listens, plans, calculates. The next morning, while he was probably nursing a hangover and pretending nothing had happened, I was already sitting in a lawyer's office. I told her everything, every detail, and she didn't flinch, just nodded, handed me a pen, and got to work. When I got home, I didn't confront him. He wasn't even there. That helped. I went straight to the security system he had forgotten even existed. The tiny cameras we installed years ago after a neighbor's car got broken into. He'd barely touched the app since, but I had. I downloaded the footage from the night of the party. Every frame, every sound, the women, the drinking, the way he laughed about me being too busy playing boss. It was all there, waiting for me like cold evidence on a silver platter. I didn't even feel angry watching it. Not anymore. What I felt was clarity, for the first time in years maybe. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to plead. I was going to be methodical. Not for revenge, not yet, but for self-respect. I froze the joint accounts. All of them. He never noticed I was the one depositing most of the money anyway. I called the bank, updated my passwords, reset everything he could ever try to weasel his way back into. I was done playing supportive. By the third day, I changed the locks. He was still gone, probably staying with a friend, or more likely with one of those women who thought his cheap charm was something rare. I didn't care where he was. I only cared that when he returned, he'd know without a word that the door he used to walk through without question no longer recognized him. I watched from the upstairs window as the locksmith worked, the metal clicking into place like punctuation on the sentence I'd waited years to write. Then I packed his things. Not carefully, not cruelly, just deliberately. Every shirt he left draped over the armchair, every cologne bottle he used before a night out, with the guys. Trash bags, not boxes, not luggage. Because when someone treats your life like it's disposable, you learn to stop wrapping their mess in niceties. I left them out front, right by the walkway, and then I taped the envelope to the door. Inside, a legal notice, divorce papers, and a copy of the footage. Neatly labeled, no explanation needed. It started raining shortly after. I don't know why that part sticks with me, but it does. I watched the trash bags get wet from the window, the fabric inside soaking through, colors darkening. But I didn't feel bad. Not for a second. I actually felt light. Like I'd just peeled off a heavy coat I didn't know I'd been wearing. And maybe part of me hoped he'd show up right then, soaked and scrambling. But he didn't. And that silence? That was the first real peace I'd had in years. He showed up the next evening, just as the sun was dipping below the trees, casting long shadows across the lawn, and across the bags that still sat untouched, right where I left them. I watched him from the kitchen, lights off, heart steady. He stood there for a moment, like he wasn't sure if he was at the right house. He tried the doorknob. It didn't budge. He knocked, softly at first, then louder. But I didn't move. Let him knock. Let him feel the distance he created with every careless choice. Then he noticed the envelope. I saw his face change, from confusion to disbelief to that wounded look men wear when they realize they're no longer in control of the narrative. He opened it right there on the porch. I imagined him reading every line, watching every second of the footage, feeling his little empire crack beneath him. He looked around, like he expected me to appear. Maybe to fight. Maybe to forgive. But I didn't give him either. I stayed behind the curtain, quiet, still, powerful. For years, I carried our life like a fragile vase, always careful not to drop it. He danced through it with muddy shoes. And now? Now he stood alone on the front step of a house that didn't belong to him anymore. And I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel pity. I felt ready. Because this wasn't the end. This was just the start of what I had planned next. I didn't scream on the porch, and I didn't text him afterward. Instead, I started with something quieter, something cleaner. I found the guest list. Not that it was official, of course, but thanks to social media and the security footage, it wasn't hard to identify the faces. I gathered names, matched them to profiles, found addresses. Some women were tagged in photos. Others had posted stories from my living room, drunk and glittery, dancing beside my wedding portrait. They didn't even blur my name in the background. I created packages, anonymous, brown envelopes, no return address. Inside each, screenshots, short video clips, carefully chosen stills from that night. And a note, not cruel, just honest. You were at this party. Did you know he was married? Most of them didn't. I wasn't surprised. Mark always had a way of making himself seem like a victim, the hard-working husband with the cold, absent wife. She's married to her job, I heard him say in one of the clips. Forgot how to be a wife a long time ago. That line became my favorite, because one of the women, the one in the red dress with the fake laugh, clearly hadn't known. And she was the one who posted the footage, not anonymously, not quietly. She blasted it online with a caption that read, "When you find out the guy you were flirting with all night has a wife, and she's a badass." It spread fast, faster than I expected. And I never said a word. I let it move on its own, like wildfire. At first, he tried to control the damage, took the video down from his own page, reported the posts, claimed it was taken out of context. But it was too late. People had already shared it, saved it, dissected it. It was in private group chats, work threads, even some meme pages. His voice, slurring that awful sentence, "She forgot how to be a wife," was now soundtrack to his downfall. And I didn't need to lift a finger. I just watched, quietly, while his carefully polished image unraveled. The fallout came swiftly. His boss called him in for a conversation. The company had a strict code of conduct, and even though the party was technically off the clock, the optics were bad, especially with the comments flooding in. Women calling him manipulative, men calling him careless. A few called him the guy from the video, like he was a punchline. I heard through a mutual friend that his promotion was quietly rescinded. No big announcement, just a quiet door closing behind him. As for his social circle, they scattered like roaches under kitchen lights. The ones who used to toast beers with him on weekends suddenly had plans. The men who cheered him on now avoided eye contact. And the women, well, they remembered the footage. They remembered the smirk, the lap, the arrogance. No one likes to realize they were just another prop in someone else's fantasy. And me? I stayed silent. I never gloated, never clapped back. I let the silence speak for me. People started whispering my name, not in pity, but with a kind of reverence. At my job, colleagues looked at me differently. Not like a victim, but like a woman who had drawn a line and dared someone to cross it. A few even pulled me aside, quietly admitting they had gone through something similar but never knew how to take their power back. That's the thing. When a woman doesn't scream, when she doesn't crumble, people don't know what to do with her strength. So they call it cold. I called it peace. I never replied to the DMs he sent once the backlash started. I saw the panic in them, the rapid shift from defensive to desperate. "You're really going to ruin me over one stupid night?" he wrote once. And I laughed. Ruin him? No. He did that all by himself. I just handed him the mirror, and in the reflection, there wasn't a man. There was a boy who thought charm was currency and that silence meant submission. He had no idea that silence could roar louder than rage. And I didn't need applause. I didn't need validation. All I needed was that moment. Quiet, late at night, standing by my window, watching the world move on while his fell apart. That was enough. But even then, I knew I wasn't finished. There was still one chapter left to write. Not for him, not for revenge, but for me. For the version of myself I had nearly lost in loving the wrong person for too long. My new apartment wasn't big. It didn't need to be. It had white walls, high windows, and a quiet that wasn't heavy. It was healing. I filled it slowly, intentionally. A worn leather chair I found at a vintage shop. A small bookshelf with only the books I loved, not the ones I used to buy for display. A bottle of wine always chilled, just in case I wanted to toast to absolutely nothing. It wasn't about starting over. It was about starting true, with no audience, no performance, just me. I began to remember myself in pieces, in the silence of Sunday mornings, in the way I made my coffee, strong and black, just how I like it, no one else to adjust for. In the music I played while folding laundry, dancing barefoot in the kitchen without worrying if I looked silly. There was no grand epiphany, no dramatic moment of triumph, just small, ordinary moments that slowly whispered, "You're home now." And for the first time in years, I believed them. I started reconnecting with friends I had slowly drifted from, not because of fights, but because I had spent so long managing his moods, his chaos, his storms. I laughed more. I slept better. And I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, because the person who kept kicking it off was no longer part of my story. Healing didn't come in waves. It came in layers. Soft, steady, mine. And I didn't miss him. Not once. What I missed was the woman I used to be. And now, she was back. Then one evening, just as the city lights began to flicker on and the hum of the world slowed to a hush, my phone lit up. A number I hadn't blocked, not out of hesitation, but out of apathy. I didn't need to cut him off completely. He was already gone. The message was short. I was drunk. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a while, not because I was tempted, but because it was almost laughable how little had changed for him. No accountability, no real apology. Just a desperate, sloppy reach for the version of me who would have said, "Okay, let's talk." But that woman no longer lived here. She packed her bags the same night I did. So I blocked the number, not out of anger, not even out of satisfaction, just necessity. Like deleting a song you once loved, but now can't stand to hear. I wasn't angry. I was simply uninterested. His voice had become background noise I no longer had to tolerate. And that, more than anything, was the victory. Not the trash bags, not the legal papers, not the viral video. It was this: being unmoved, free. Calm in a way that no one could shake. The kind of calm that comes not from winning a battle, but from walking away from a war you never wanted in the first place. The kind of calm you sip like wine at the end of a long day. Grateful, not because it's perfect, but because it's finally yours. That night I opened a bottle of wine, the good one, the one I'd been saving without even knowing what for. I curled up by the window, glass in hand, city below me, soft music playing in the background. No tears, no heavy reflections, just a moment of stillness. And then I raised my glass, not to him, not to revenge, but to the decision that changed everything, coming home early. That one twist of fate, that single instinct to turn back. It didn't just end a party, it saved my life. I thought about how many times I'd ignored my gut, How often I'd smoothed over cracks with hope and silence. But not anymore. Now I listen. To the warning signs, to the quiet voice inside me, to the feeling that tells you something's not right. And I honor it. That's what this was really about. Not punishing him, not proving anything, but choosing myself, fully, finally, unapologetically. So, if you ask me if I regret it, the answer is no. I don't regret coming home early. I don't regret what I saw. I don't regret walking away without a word. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is show up at the exact moment she wasn't expected, and instead of falling apart, she begins again, stronger than ever.